I never thought my own mother would say my kids weren't welcome at her table. Yet there I was, holding the phone in one hand and gripping the edge of the kitchen counter with the other, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October, and the air outside still smelled faintly of maple and wood smoke. I had just picked up the phone expecting a normal conversation about pie recipes or who was bringing the cranberry sauce this year. But instead, my mom's voice was light, almost too cheerful, as she said, "Honey, we need to talk about Thanksgiving. This year, we're doing things a little differently, just adults, something smaller, more intimate." At first, I laughed, thinking she was joking. Then I realized she wasn't. And the worst part? My brother's kids were still invited. Why just my children? Why now? I stepped away from the stove, my chest tightening as the weight of her words settled in. I had spent years, decades, trying to earn my parents' approval. I was the one who called every weekend, sent birthday cards early, and showed up even when it meant rearranging my life. And now she wanted me to celebrate Thanksgiving without Maddie and Owen. My 2 reasons for breathing? I try to keep my voice calm. So, Grant's girls will be there, but Maddie and Owen aren't invited. There was a pause. Too long. Then, "You know how energetic your two can be, sweetheart. It's just easier with Grant's girls. They're quieter, more composed." Composed. The word hit like a slap. That wasn't just about my kids. That was about me. I forced a smile into my voice, though it felt brittle. If my kids aren't welcome, then neither am I. Another pause. Then a sharp sigh. "Suit yourself." And she hung up. I stood frozen. The silence in the kitchen suddenly deafening. From the other room, Maddie's laughter rang out. She and Owen were building a blanket fort, giggling over who got to be the guard dog. They had no idea that the people who were supposed to love them unconditionally had just drawn a line in the sand. What kind of mother would I be if I let them feel like second-class family? That night, I lay awake replaying every holiday, every gift, every little slight I had shrugged off. I had told myself for years that it wasn't favoritism, that I was imagining it. But now the mask was off, and the truth was staring me in the face. They never saw my children the same way they saw Grant's. I had a choice to make, and I already knew what it would be. But I had no idea just how far my family would go once they realized I wasn't playing nice anymore. Would you like me to continue with the next segment? Subtle favoritism becomes open rejection? I wish I could say this was the first time something like this had happened. That this was some strange, one-off misstep in an otherwise loving family. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't new, it was just the first time they said it out loud. Growing up, I was always the one who had to try harder. Be quieter, less emotional, more agreeable. Grant, on the other hand, could do no wrong. He once missed Mom's birthday entirely, sent a text 3 days late, and she laughed it off like it was charming. I showed up 10 minutes late one year with a homemade cake, and she didn't speak to me for a week. And now here we were again. I asked her, gently, "Mom, are you saying Maddie and Owen aren't invited because they're not well-behaved enough for your table?" She hesitated. Then the truth slipped out, smooth and casual like it didn't sting. "Well, Grant's girls are just easier. They're calm. They sit still. You know how your two are. They can be a handful." A handful. That's how she described my children. The ones who made her Mother's Day cards with glitter and misspelled words. The ones who once spent an entire Saturday afternoon baking her cookies and FaceTiming her so she could taste test the batter. My throat tightened. They're kids, Mom. They're 6 and 10. Of course they have energy. That doesn't make them bad. Another pause. Then her tone turned defensive. "This isn't personal, Lauren. Don't make it a thing. It's just one dinner. But it was personal. It had always been personal. I hung up the phone and sat there in silence, the sunlight slanting through the kitchen window, catching the dust in the air like tiny, drifting sparks. In the next room, Owen was humming to himself. Maddie was sprawled out on the floor, drawing a Thanksgiving turkey with purple feathers. They were so innocent, so undeserving of this quiet rejection. And that's when it clicked. I wasn't going to fight for space in a family that constantly made me feel like a guest in my own story. They wanted to make this just one dinner? Fine. But they were about to find out that shutting out my kids meant shutting me out too. And this time, I wasn't coming back. It's strange how one moment can unlock every memory you've spent years trying to bury. After that call, it was like someone opened a floodgate in my chest, and everything I'd pushed down came rushing back at once. I thought about Maddie's last birthday, when my parents stopped by with a last-minute card and a pack of off-brand crayons, while Grant's daughters got a handmade quilt and a full day at the zoo. I thought about Christmas mornings where they accidentally left my kids' names off the gift list, but had perfectly wrapped boxes for everyone else. At the time, I told myself not to make a fuss. It's just how they are, I'd say. They mean well. I bit my tongue so many times. I'm surprised it didn't bleed through every holiday photo. But the truth is, I spent years contorting myself to fit into a family that never made space for me. I became the peacemaker, the fixer, the dependable one. I showed up early, stayed late, and cleaned up the messes that weren't mine. I kept hoping that if I just did enough, if I was kind enough, helpful enough, quiet enough, maybe one day I'd stop feeling like an afterthought. That day never came. And now, hearing my mom justify excluding my children as if it were just a polite dinner decision, it broke something in me. Not in a loud, dramatic way. More like a silent snap. Deep and final, like the moment a bridge gives out beneath you, and you realize there's nothing holding you up anymore. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, reliving 1,000 paper cuts I'd called love. Every time they skipped Maddie's dance recital because it was too far. Every time they forgot Owen's preschool graduation, but made it to Grant's oldest daughter's violin solo like it was a red carpet event. I wasn't just grieving the Thanksgiving dinner we wouldn't attend. I was grieving the fantasy I'd built. The one where my parents loved all their grandchildren the same. Where I wasn't the child they merely tolerated. But grief has a way of giving birth to clarity. And by morning I knew I wasn't shrinking myself anymore. Not for them. Not for anyone. They wanted peace at the table. I wanted peace in my soul. And I was finally ready to choose mine. The next morning, I poured my coffee with shaky hands. Not from caffeine, but from resolve. The kind that doesn't erupt like fire, but simmers, steady and unrelenting. I stared at my phone, debating whether to call my mother back, to give her one more chance to take it all back. To say it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, something she'd regret. But deep down I knew she wouldn't. Because this wasn't new. This was the final straw in a house of cards I'd spent a lifetime balancing. And it had finally collapsed. Maddie and Owen were in the living room, still wrapped in their fort of blankets and couch cushions. Owen peeked out, his hair a tousled mess. "Are we still going to Grandma's for turkey?" he asked, holding up a picture he'd drawn, a lopsided turkey with stick figure arms. I blinked back the sting in my eyes and forced a smile. "Not this year, buddy. We're making our own Thanksgiving." He didn't question it. Just nodded and ducked back into the fort, shouting something about needing extra pillows for the castle walls. And that moment, it told me everything I needed to know. My kids didn't need fancy dinners or forced smiles. They needed me. Present. Whole. Uncompromised. So, I made my decision official. I texted my mother, "If my children aren't welcome at your table, then I'm not either." This isn't the negotiation. The read receipt came fast. Her response? Even faster. Suit yourself. But don't expect us to rearrange everything just for your kids. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly her. Cold, clipped, and dripping in entitlement. Rearranging everything? They hadn't even considered my children as part of the everything. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. I gathered the kids and told them we were starting a new tradition this year, one where nobody had to earn their seat at the table, where love wasn't conditional and laughter didn't have to be quiet. Maddie squealed, Owen cheered, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Power, peace, and a quiet kind of freedom. But little did I know, my parents weren't finished. They were just getting started. It started with a declined card at the grocery store. 1 minute. I was in line with a cart full of ingredients for our new Thanksgiving. Cranberry orange muffins, brown sugar sweet potatoes, the good maple syrup. The next, I was standing there, heat rising to my cheeks as the machine beeped a second time. Declined. Gas station charges 3 states away. Pharmacy pickups. Online PU. Then it hit me like a brick to the chest. My parents were still on my account. Years ago, when Dad had surgery and they were struggling with bills, I added them as authorized users on my credit card, just to get them through a few months. I meant to remove them once they got back on their feet. But life happened. Divorce. Job shifts. The kids. I forgot. And they never brought it up again. Not once. I raced home, logged into the full statement history, and stared at the total. Over $15,000. Not recent, ongoing. My hands trembled as I canceled their access. The moment I hit remove user, a strange kind of calm washed over me. Like I had just unplugged the cord that had been draining me for years without me realizing it. They must have noticed immediately. Not even an hour later. My phone lit up with a call from my mom. I let it ring. Then another. Finally, I answered. Her voice, sharp and accusing. Did you cancel the credit card? I didn't flinch. The one you've been secretly using for years? Yes. Oh. Don't be dramatic, Lauren, she snapped. We figured it was part of your way of helping. You make good money. It's not like we're asking for much. That was the moment the switch flipped in me. You excluded my children from your holiday table, I said, voice cold and steady. And then expected me to keep funding your life like nothing happened. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. She gasped like I'd slapped her. But I was done being the good daughter who paid in silence. What I didn't know then was how far they'd go to punish me for cutting the cord. And their next move would prove they never wanted peace, just control. After that phone call, their built-in problem solver, their emotional punching bag when things didn't go their way. But the moment I canceled that credit card and said the word no out loud, it was like I'd committed a crime in their eyes. They didn't hear boundaries, they heard betrayal. The next few days were radio silence, but it wasn't peaceful. It was charged. Like standing on the edge of a storm, waiting for the first thunderclap. My mother sent a flurry of passive-aggressive texts. We didn't raise you to be so cruel. Family doesn't turn its back over one dinner. This isn't how a grateful daughter acts. I didn't respond. Then the call started coming from my dad. Short. Clipped. Urgent. I ignored those too. I wasn't falling for it again. Not this time. Instead, I threw myself into planning our Thanksgiving at home. Maddie picked the movie Free Birds, her favorite, and Owen helped me make handprint turkeys to tape to the fridge. James, my partner, brought home fresh cider and made a pie from scratch. Our little house felt warm in a way that wasn't just about the oven. It was safe, full of laughter and love that asked for nothing in return. But even as we stirred sweet potatoes and sang along to old holiday songs, I knew it wasn't over. People like my parents don't let go of power quietly. They'd gotten used to the version of me who kept the peace, who paid the bills, who swallowed disappointment with a tight smile and called it maturity. Now that version of me was gone, and they were furious. So when the mail came a week later with an official-looking envelope, I didn't even need to open it to know it was them. But I did. And sure enough, inside was a formal letter from their attorney. They weren't just upset. They were suing me, not for the credit card, not for damages, but for something so absurd, so manipulative. I had to read it twice to believe it. They wanted me to reimburse them for raising me, and they had put a price on my childhood. $82,300. It was war now, and they had no idea who they were up against. When I first held that letter in my hands, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so stunningly ridiculous that my brain needed a second to process it. My parents weren't demanding an apology. They weren't asking for reconciliation. No, they had gone straight to a lawyer and drafted a formal request for $82,300, allegedly the total cost of raising me from birth to 18. They even included itemized charges: diapers, school supplies, braces, family vacations. As if parenting had been some business arrangement I'd failed to pay off. I handed the letter to James, who read it silently, his jaw tightening with every line. "They're trying to send you an invoice for your own childhood," he finally said. "That's not just petty. That's calculated." And he was right. This wasn't about money. Not really. This was about punishing me for cutting them off, for stepping out of line, for saying no and meaning it. My parents weren't heartbroken. They were power-hungry. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the page, my father's. His pen always had a heavy press, the ink dark and unforgiving. Just like him. I could almost hear his voice in the margins. "Actions have consequences, Lauren." "Yes, they do." So the next morning, I drove to their house with the letter clutched in my hand. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want to give them time to rehearse. When my mother opened the door, her face froze in that polished smile she always wore when she wanted something. I didn't return it. "I assume you've read it," she said, arms folding tightly across her chest. I held up the letter. "You seriously thought this would work?" "It's only fair," my father added, appearing behind her. "We made sacrifices. You've benefited from everything we gave up." I looked between them, something cold and resolute settling into my bones. "You're trying to charge me for being your daughter," I said, "while expecting free money from me for the rest of your lives." They didn't flinch. So I did what I should have done years ago. I ripped the letter in half, right there on their porch, and watched the pieces fall to the ground like ash. "You're not getting a dime," I said. "And from now on, you're getting nothing." I turned and walked away, but I knew this wasn't the end. People like them don't give up. They escalate. I thought tearing up that letter would be the end of it. I hoped, naively, that standing my ground, firm and clear, would finally make them see I was done. That I was no longer the daughter who could be guilt, cornered, or bought. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people who've built their entire identity on control don't just surrender when you draw a boundary. They look for new ways to cross it. It started quietly, texts from my brother Grant, laced with condescension and fake concern. "Mom's really upset. Can you just talk to her?" Then came the voice messages from my father, each colder than the last. "You're tearing this family apart, Lauren." But what came next knocked the wind out of me. New Year's Eve. We were in the middle of decorating cookies with the kids. Maddie smearing icing across Owen's nose while James queued up a fireworks playlist. Our house felt like a snow globe, sealed off, cozy, and safe. Until the doorbell rang. I opened it, already dreading who might be standing there, and sure enough, there they were. My parents. Grant. Even his wife, Sophie. All dressed like they'd come for Sunday brunch, not an ambush. My mother's voice was syrupy, but tight. We just want to talk, Lauren. We don't want things to go too far. My father stepped forward. We've spoken to a lawyer. We've been reading about grandparents' rights. The words hit me like a punch. For a moment, all I heard was the hum of the Christmas lights behind me. You're threatening to sue me? I said slowly. To force your way back into my children's lives? Grant jumped in. Come on, Lauren. You're being unreasonable. This is about the kids. I laughed, sharp, incredulous. You excluded them from Thanksgiving. You spent years making them feel like less. And now you want the law to undo what you broke. I pulled out my phone, heart pounding but steady. I have every text, every voicemail, every charge. If you want to take this to court, go ahead. But I promise you, you'll lose more than your pride. For once, they had nothing to say. I closed the door. Quietly. Finally. And as the lock clicked into place, I realized something chillingly liberating. They didn't want a family. They wanted control. And I had just taken it away. After slamming that door on New Year's Eve, I stood there for a long moment, hand still on the handle, heart pounding like I'd just run a race. Not out of fear, but release. For the first time in my life, I hadn't folded. I hadn't apologized for making someone uncomfortable with the truth. And that truth was crystal clear now. My parents weren't interested in reconciliation. They were interested in winning, in control, in keeping me in a role I'd outgrown. I wish I could say they gave up after that they backed off, sat with their shame, and finally realized they'd pushed too far. But narcissists don't retreat. They recalculate. Over the following weeks, the silence from their side of the family was deafening.
No texts.
No calls.
No guilt-laced voicemails.
Just absence. And it was glorious. We made snowmen in the backyard, baked banana bread from scratch, and played Monopoly until Owen flipped the board over in frustration. It was the kind of joy that wasn't loud or flashy, but real.
Ours.
Then came the envelope. No lawyer's return address this time, just a card-sized package in a gold foil wrap, tucked neatly in our mailbox a week before Valentine's Day. Inside was a note. Let's not ruin everything over one misunderstanding. Families should be together. Taped to the card was a $200 gift card to a fancy steakhouse. The same one my parents had taken Grant and his wife to every year for their anniversary, and never once invited James or me. A bribe, wrapped in sentiment. I tossed it in the trash without a second thought. The next day, my mom called. We're trying, Lauren. Doesn't that count for anything?
I didn't even sigh this time. Just said, no.
Trying means showing up for birthdays, for recitals, for people, not power. And then I hung up. I wasn't interested in repairing something I never broke. They had slammed that door long before I did. What they never understood, and maybe never will, is that family isn't about shared blood or shared guilt. It's about showing up consistently and without conditions. And when it comes to my children, I will never again let anyone treat them like they're optional. They'd made their final move, and I had made mine. Spring arrived like a soft exhale. The snow melted into streams that curved along the edge of our backyard, and daffodils started poking through the thawed soil like tiny declarations of hope. One Sunday afternoon, I sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade in hand, watching Maddie and Owen chase soap bubbles across the lawn. Their laughter danced through the breeze, light and unburdened. And for the first time in years, I realized what I was feeling wasn't just relief, it was freedom. There were no missed calls from my parents.
No guilt-tripping texts.
No sudden appearances at the door with forced smiles and veiled threats. Just quiet. Honest to God quiet. James came out, wiping flour from his hands. He and Maddie had been baking banana bread again, their latest weekend tradition. He handed me a warm slice and sat beside me. "It's been quiet," he said with a knowing glance. I nodded. "Yeah, feels good." He didn't have to ask if I thought they'd ever try again. We both knew they might. But something had changed. I had changed. I no longer flinched at the sound of their names. I no longer wondered what I could do to fix things that were never mine to fix. And most importantly, I no longer accepted the lie that family means loyalty at the cost of self-respect. My children knew who showed up. They saw who clapped at recitals, who made pancakes in pajamas, who stayed up late during storms just to chase monsters from closets. And it wasn't my parents. It was me. It was James. It was us. This little team of 4 building a life that didn't need approval or performance. I used to think peace would come when they apologized, when they finally saw me, valued me, treated me like I mattered. But peace came when I stopped waiting, when I let go of the version of family I was raised to chase and embraced the one I chose to build. So no, I never went back. I never sent another dollar, or card, or call. And I didn't miss them. Because this porch, this laughter, this simple, sacred calm, this is what love looks like when it doesn't come with strings.